Hey guys, welcome back to Mo's Game Table. Today we're going to take a look inside the Third World War Designer Signature Edition. This is a game designed by Frank Chadwick and published by Compass Games. Well, it's been a long wait, but it's finally here, and I had to wait a little extra because I was getting a little jealous. Everyone else was getting their copies, but mine was taking its time getting to me, but it is finally here. All 4 games, 1 box, Arctic Front, Battle for Germany, Southern Front, and the Persian Gulf. So let's take a look at the back of the box and see what this game's all about. The Third World War Designer Signature Edition marks one of the largest and most ambitious game undertakings to date, covering not 1, but 4 true wargaming classics by Frank Chadwick, faithfully remastered and updated as a deluxe edition. Hailed by many as one of the finest and most playable game series covering the NATO and Warsaw Pact, the Third World War brings together all 4 games of the series into one comprehensive package for all to enjoy. Third World War, subtitled Battle for Germany, is a game of the struggle for Central Europe by the forces of NATO and the Warsaw Pact. Southern Front, raced for the Turkish Straits, adds Bulgaria and Romania, reinforced with 3 Soviet armies and special capability forces, facing Greece, Turkey, and Yugoslavia, thinly reinforced with a few elite units from the US, France, and Italy. Arctic Front, Battle for Norway, covers the Soviet Leningrad Front, with its special airborne, amphibious, and Arctic-equipped contingents. Assault of Norway, reinforced with a few elite units from the US, Britain, and Canada, and other NATO nations. And the Persian Gulf, Battle for the Middle East, includes a special game within a game covering the diplomatic, political, and military maneuvers by the Soviet Union and the United States in the Middle East before and leading to the general outbreak of the Third World War. And you can see the example of the maps over here, the counters. The components, we get 6 22 by 34-inch maps, 9 counter sheets, numerous play rates and displays, 20 diplomacy cards, 1 rulebook, 1 playbook, and 4 6-sided dice. It is rated as a medium complexity. Timescale is 1 turn equals 1 week. Each hex on the map is 45 kilometers. Unit scale is divisions, brigades, and 100 aircraft per unit. Number of players for 2 to 7. Suitability for solitaire is high. The average playtime is 6 to 10 hours based on the scenario, with 36 plus hours for the campaign. It is recommended for ages 14 and up. So let's take a look inside and see what we get. All right, we have our Compass catalog. Always good to have one of those. Our 46 deck of diplomacy cards. Our rulebook, playbook, a whole battery of player aid cards, and there are a bunch. Still got some more here. And we have our counters. This is a single sheet, shrink wrapped, and then we have the bulk of them shrink wrapped. And we have our 6 22 by 34-inch maps for all the fronts. So let's set up the maps and take a closer look at the game. Now we'll take a look at the maps that come with the game. There are 3 scenarios that are only going to use 1 map each, and that is going to be for Battle for Germany, the Arctic Front, and the Southern Front. Persian Gulf is the larger map set that you see down at the bottom. We get to that last. It's 2 side-by-side maps, but everything else is going to use a single map. First one here is Battle for Germany. This is map A. As you can see, all the different types of terrain you'd expect to see. Woods, rough, mountains, clear, major cities, minor cities, rivers, national boundaries. We've also got our air theater boundaries out there. It is a very well done map. They all look beautiful, very easy to read, very easy to understand. Everything will work very well for this game. Then we have map B, which will be used for the Arctic Front. We've got Norway, Sweden, Finland, and then the Soviet Union at the top. Then we have map C for the Southern Front, covering an area from Italy to Moldova and then Turkey in the bottom right. Then we get to map D, and this has no scenarios associated with it in the box. There will be future expansions and scenarios that will come out for this, but this is not going to be used for anything in the box. You can always, of course, create any scenarios that you like to use on this map yourself, but this is kind of a future look at what we've got in store for us for more expansions on the way for Third World War. And lastly, we get to maps E and F, which are for the Persian Gulf scenarios, and these are beautifully done maps. All of them are. Compass did a fantastic job with these, as always. Now we'll take a look at the player aids that come with the game, and there are a bunch. Now these ones I'm going to show you right now, they are broken into both NATO and Warsaw Pact, so that's going to cut it in half, but we still then will have a lot to look at for these setups. Starting off with the expanded sequence of play, we had the initial segment, the Pact segment, the Pact First Impulse, and then the NATO Reserve Impulse on the front. On the back, we have the Pact Second Impulse, the NATO segment, NATO First Impulse, the NATO Second Impulse, and then the final segment. Then we get the National Factional Data Chart. On the back, we get the breakdown of the NATO organization as well as how to read the counters. Then we also have the same for the Warsaw Pact organization. Next, we have the map legend and the unit identification chart. Then the terrain effects chart giving you a breakdown of the unit types, the cost for a mech, motorized, air mobile, and leg, any combat effects, and then advance and hexes, as well as stacking limitations at the bottom right. Then we have the critical losses display. Then we have tracks for NATO air nuclear attack points, missile nuclear attack points, artillery nuclear attack points, and air transport points, as well as holding boxes at the bottom. We also have the same sheet for the Warsaw Pact forces. Then we have the air display tracks for Northern Theater and the Eastern European Theater. This covers our crater tracks, air superiority, units that are available, grounded, shot down, and flown, as well as weather. And we have further air tracks for the Southwestern Theater, Balkan Theater, Persian Gulf, and the Western Asia Theater. On the next sheet, we have our combat results table, air combat table, air defense fire table, proficiency modifiers, weather table, and the nuclear war table. Then we have the combat odds track, as well as the steps for resolving combat. Then we have the game turn track, the diplomacy charts, nuclear war levels, and the Norwegian sea control, as well as victory point track at the bottom. And lastly, we have the tracker for off-map movement for both Warsaw Pact and NATO forces. Next, we'll take a look at the scenario setup displays. First up, we have the Battle for Germany. This is the NATO and the NATO reinforcement displays. Then the Warsaw Pact setup and reinforcement displays for Battle for Germany. Then we have the NATO setup and reinforcement display, as well as the neutral setup and reinforcement displays for the Arctic Front scenario. Then we have the Warsaw Pact setup and reinforcement displays for the Arctic Front scenario, as well as the setup and reinforcement displays for the Persian Gulf scenario, as well as the Southern Front Balkan Entente scenario and the Persian Gulf scenario. Then the Warsaw Pact setup and reinforcement display for the Southern Front scenario, as well as the Southern Front Balkan Entente scenario. Then we have the setup and reinforcement display for the neutrals in the Persian Gulf scenario. Then the neutral setup and reinforcement display for the combined game. Then we have the NATO setup for the combined game, the NATO reinforcement display for the combined game, then the Warsaw Pact setup for the combined game, and lastly, the Warsaw Pact reinforcement display for the combined game. And we'll take a quick look at some of the diplomacy cards that are in use during the game. In the Persian Gulf, in the combined game, you will use diplomacy. And during the diplomacy phase, each player will play a card. We have the Soviet cards here and the United States cards here. On each player's turn, they will play a card. Sometimes there will be a prerequisite required. Like for example here, Jordanian intervention says prerequisite Jordan must be U.S. committed. For the Soviet Union up here, it says Syria must be committed for Syrian intervention. If you don't meet the prerequisite, then you can't use the card. This is how you're going to gain influence over the non-committed countries in the region, and this continues on until general mobilization when war is declared. And we'll take a look at the counter sheets that come with the game, and there are a bunch, 9 sheets overall. On this first sheet, we have Soviet units, Afghani units, Romanian units, Czechoslovakian units, and East German units. Reading these counters, we'll look at these Soviet units here. The top bar, that blue bar, that is the first order of organization color band. The purple one beneath that is the second order of organization color band. The 3 numbers at the bottom are the attack strength, defense strength, and the proficiency rating. And the number on the left-hand side is the stacking points. And then up at the top left, that CN gives us any type of special information on the unit, like chemical and nuclear or limited military, things like that. On the next counter sheet, we have some Kuwaiti, Saudi units at the top, along with Iraqi units, Iranian units, Finnish units, Australian units, Polish, Israelis, Bulgarian, and finishing out with the rest of the Soviet units. On the third sheet, we have a bunch more different units. Kurdistan, Mujahideen, UAE, Sweden, Albania, Syria, Jordan, Yugoslavian, Iranian communists, some Spanish units there and some Spanish air here, Norwegian, Belgian, Netherlands, UK, Italy, and then we have the Danish units to finish out the sheet. On sheet 4, we have Greece, Turkey, France, West German, US, and Hungarian forces. On the next sheet, we start our administrative counters. This continues on to sheet 6, sheet 7, sheet 8, and finally on sheet 9. Next, we'll take a look at the rules. This is a 44-page full-color rulebook. Inside of the front cover, we have the table of contents listing out all the rules and their associated page numbers. Then we have a little blurb about this designer signature edition and the introduction breaking down all the 4 different games that are in the overall box game that we got here. You have your game components, your maps, your counters, a breakdown on how to read the different counters in the game, rules and charts, diplomacy cards, your parts inventory, and then the sequence of play on page 5. Sequence of play is listed out on page 6, and then a mention of the expanded sequence of play, which is part of the player aids that we looked at before. Then we get into zones of control, types of Zocs, limits of Zocs, and the effects of Zocs, stacking, how to figure your stacking points, your stacking limits, movement, when units move, movement allowance, mobility classes, movement limitations. Then we have some illustrated examples like effects of Zocs, special movement. Then the off-map transport net, which we looked at before with the player aid cards for both Warsaw Pact and the NATO units. Ground combat, when units may attack, restrictions on combat, declaring attacks and determining odds. Proficiency modifiers, combat resolution, combat results, disruptions, retreats, advance after combat, regrouping, isolation, your lines of communication, your friendly sources, effects, locations. And then we get into the air war on page 13. The basics of the air war, and then maintenance, crater repair, air superiority allocation, missions, different types of missions you can do, strike missions, deep strikes, logistical strikes, runway cratering, strike interdiction missions, and then the sequencing and then the air combat portion itself. Then we have an air combat example, air defense fire, loss consolidation, terrain effects, transfer, special air units, grounding procedures, emergency supply priorities for your supply, determining which units are unsupplied, air transport and airborne assault, naval transport and amphibious assaults, special naval rules, weather determination, and the effects on combat, movement, things like that. Special rules for territorial reservists, partisans, limited military abilities, rivalries, Soviet mountain divisions, Soviet divisional breakdowns, Soviet strategic reserve commitment, Revolutionary Guard replacements, NATO forward movement, Norwegian early reaction, Pact logistical breakdowns, and then neutrals, how to handle all the different neutral factions in the game. That goes on for a few pages. And we have critical losses, counting your losses, vulnerable nations, shaken, demoralized, Romanian unreliability. Then we get into surrender conditions and effects of surrender, new units, air and ground units. Then we get into the diplomacy game on page 29, which we talked about earlier with those cards, how to use those for both the Persian Gulf and the combined game for the diplomacy phase until you get to general mobilization and the outbreak of war. And then we have the scenarios, victory conditions, and victory points. Then we have the theaters of operational, which is optional. You have areas of operation, restrictions on operations, exceptions, and then nuclear warfare is also optional. Types of nuclear attacks, field artillery shells, aircraft bombs, and theater-level missiles. Then we have strategic nuclear exchange, and then the victory point adjustments. Then we have chemical warfare abilities, Romanian operations, winter conditions, tactical advantage. Then we have the expanded sequence of play broken down for you here, just like it is on the player aid card. And now on the back of the rulebook, we have the rules index. And lastly, we'll take a look at the playbook. This is an 83-page full-color book. Inside of the front cover, we have the table of contents breaking down each of the different games for you for the Battle for Germany, Southern Front, Arctic Front, Persian Gulf, and then the Battle for Germany and Southern Front, Battle for Germany and Arctic Front, War in Europe, and then the combined game. You can easily go to any of those scenarios that you want by looking them up here in the table of contents. We're not going to go through the entire thing because there's so many pages here, and really all it's going to be is orders of battle, but we'll take a look at it real quickly so you can see what's in it. Have a breakdown here of the Battle for Germany at the very beginning. Then we get into the composition of major Soviet units and NATO units. Then we have some notes. 3 scenarios for each of these games. You have the standard game, which is 8 turns, the short game, which is 3 turns, and the extended game, which is 12 turns. And this is for the Battle for Germany here. The short game, extended game, I'll explain to you, and then you get into your initial setup for NATO. And you can see all the different units that come in on the different turns. Then we have neutrals. Then we have the Warsaw Pact setup. Everybody comes in on the different turns for reinforcements. And then the Southern Front, same thing. Composition of the pack units and the Turkish and Greek units. Some player notes. Then we get to the standard game, the extended game, and the Balkan Entente scenario, and then different variants. And then we get into the NATO setup, your reinforcements per turn. Let me just start flipping through because there's a lot to cover here. Warsaw Pact setup. Then we get to the Arctic Front. It's going to have the same thing, some notes, your breakdown for NATO and Warsaw Pact units, your extended game. Then we have the Battle for Germany and Southern Front, and then also the Battle for Germany and Arctic Front. Then we get to the combined game at page 60. And the good thing about this is when you want to look something up, you don't necessarily have to worry about the page numbers. You can always just look at the bottom here. It says 204 combined, 102 SF for Southern Front, and then Battle for Germany. These are all color-coded, so it makes it easier for you to find them in the book. And this will give you a breakdown of the scenarios, general information, standard game, extended, and the neutral setup here for the combined game. And it's going to be big, so obviously you're going to have a large order of battle here for this, but I wanted to kind of just briefly flip through it so you can see the different setups here for this, because like I said, it's going to be a lot in this one. And we don't need to look at all of these in great detail because it's really just orders of battle here for that. And then we have the unit abbreviations. Then we get to the project team development notes here at the end of the rules, which is pretty interesting. Get to read from the project team, and then we have the sequence of play on the back of the playbook. And that is a look at everything you get inside of the Third World War Designer Signature Edition. This is a game designed by Frank Chadwick and published by Compass Games. Once again, Compass knocks it out of the park. Fantastic job with this. We get 4 games in one box: Arctic Front, Battle for Germany, Southern Front, and Persian Gulf. We've been waiting for this for a long time, and it's finally here. Compass did an amazing job with this. Map graphics are outstanding. The counter graphics are outstanding. We've got all the player aid cards we can need. We've got the breakdown in the playbook, and we've got the rule book. We've got the diplomacy cards. Everything we need is right here in this box. We even got an extra map, which is pretty cool if you want to create your own scenarios, or if you want to wait for the expansion scenarios, which are going to be coming, which is fantastic. So worthwhile getting into this system 100%, especially if you're a World War III fan like I am. It is going to be around for a while. It has been around since the 80s, but now this new edition is going to just boost it up a little bit more, and there are going to be more expansions coming out. So this is a system that's going to be around for quite a long time. And Compass continues to lead the way in World War III gaming. So it's a great time to be a World War III wargamer right now with the way Compass is putting these games out. Thin Red Line game is also doing an amazing job as well. But man, just a great time to be a hypothetical World War III gamer. So looking forward to getting these ones on the table and playing them out individually as well as the combined game at some point in the future. Well, I hope that helps you guys out if you'd be curious about this one. If you have any comments or questions, post them down below. Thanks for tuning in, guys. See you next time.